All right, so today's focus is DNA. So we talked a little bit about, yesterday we talked about genetic information and heredity and traits and characteristics and things like that. So today we're going to talk about sort of where all that comes from, a little more detail of the genetic information that does create you and me and different organisms and all of their characteristics. So it's a really interesting topic, DNA. It's a big topic. There's a lot of research been done on it. Close your Chromebooks, please. There's a lot of research been done on it, and there's a lot of things that we've learned about the genetic code and about all the information that is somehow amazingly stored within each of our cells and the nucleus of each of our cells that give instructions for all the cellular activity, for growth and development and repair. It's amazing what we are learning in science here. And so I want to talk a little bit about that today. So DNA was discovered in 1969. Discovered. Okay. Well, some major aspects of DNA were uncovered in 1969. So there was a breakthrough. Okay. Now we have to put this in proper perspective. DNA did not just spontaneously jump into existence in 1969. This is something that has been happening for eons, and we finally sort of figured out a little bit about how it works. Just a little bit. And when I say just a little bit, we kind of uncovered the structure of DNA, and we are still learning about how DNA really works and how amazing that it is. So the DNA molecule is absolutely staggering in its complexity. It contains all of the instructions is the word for this blank, for making each type of molecule in an organism, and for making and arranging these molecules at the proper stages of development. All right, so DNA makes its own mechanism to check and to fix itself, and is the most complex and comprehensive storage system known to man. So when we talk about, your flash drives with all these gigabytes of information and computers and all this, all this sort of ability to store the terabytes of this and that, and well, the DNA molecule, all the information that's stored in the DNA molecule, is absolutely amazing. I could throw out some numbers for you, but like on a pinhead, literally like on the end of a needle of DNA is like volumes and volumes. All of those books in the back shelf, all of them, would not be enough to fit all the information that would be on that pinhead of DNA. Like it's astounding. And when you really sort of start to uncover the complexity of this, it's amazing. So a gene, okay, so you've heard of genetics, right? A gene, G-E-N-E, is an uninterrupted segment of DNA that contains coded instructions for a specific characteristic. Okay, so we talked about traits, characteristics, that sort of thing. And so a gene, and again, we're not going to get into too much fine detail here in this lesson, but a gene is a part of a DNA. It's a segment of DNA that codes for certain specific characteristics for you and for me. Okay? So on your notes here, you'll see some diagrams, some pictures that I've clipped in for you. So here's you, okay, right here. Here's your silhouette, okay. And inside you, you're made of cells. Inside the cell is the nucleus. Inside the nucleus, chromosomes. Inside chromosomes, we have this DNA structure. And the structure of DNA is famously called the double helix. It's a double helical structure, which is kind of like a twisted staircase like this, okay? It's not perfectly symmetrical, so it'll tough to see here, but it's not like we have, this going on and then it's like perfectly balanced like this and, really cute like a bow. It's not like that. It's more like this and kind of like, like this. Like it kind of like moves along with itself. It's sort of overall, it kind of like weaves a little bit. It's not just kind of straight up and down. So it's tough to tell, but it kind of like weaves a little bit left and right, and it kind of follows itself. It's sort of like, if you look in math, I don't know, you guys don't have much experience with this, but a sine graph and a cosine graph move in a similar fashion to sort of a DNA structure. So it kind of like, you know, moves, it's just slightly out of phase. So it's kind of more like that than it is like a bow tie or something, but that's sort of what the shape is there. So on the DNA strand, on the DNA helix, there are certain chemicals. These are nitrogen-based chemicals. And we're not going to get into too much of these, but all of the instructions are somehow, amazingly, built into the combination of these base pairs here. And they're named adenine, thymine, guanine, and cytosine. And those are that's where the instructions are in the DNA, kind of in this bottom part here. All right, and the backbone of the DNA is made of something different, sugar phosphate. Okay, so this picture down here, that picture down here is sort of I think it's like a resonance structure. It's a picture, like an X-ray picture of sort of. This is like the best picture I think we have of DNA, and this is sort of one of the pieces to the puzzle that uncovered the structure of DNA. So it doesn't look like much, but there were three main scientists, and Francis Crick, somebody Watson, oh boy, and a lady, Rosalind Franklin, I believe her name was. Don't quote me, I didn't have those written down. But Crick and Watson and Franklin were the sort of the main. Crick and Watson were the scientists that published all this stuff, and the lady, Franklin, was the one that took this picture, I believe. And so she had a lot of work to do too. She was kind of a lab assistant, didn't get a lot of credit at the time. But anyways, so again, this was uncovered back in the late 60s, and there's been a lot of research and a lot of really interesting stuff happening in the study of DNA and our genes and our coded instructions. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I've got a video here that I want to show you. It's going to be posted on the website. I won't probably show it here, but I might discuss a little bit about it on this particular lesson. But if you're going to watch this lesson later, or if you're looking at this video will be attached to the website. You can watch it on your own. And so we're going to pause the video right now and watch that video, and then I'll discuss a little bit about it throughout. All right, so we've just watched this video. I just want to make a comment on a couple things here that came about in this video, and just how complex DNA is. You remember, we all came from a single cell, which is amazing that all the information that is required to build you and me came from a single cell, from the information in one cell. Now, these cells divide, and as the organism develops and grows, this little diagram was one from the video, and it's a good visual representation of the instructions that are given are kind of a low amount of starting instructions. And those instructions fan out and have a tremendous, and they call it a downstream effect, in that these high-level coded instructions have many different layers of complexity in order to fan out and to branch out and to create all these different sort of body plans and featuring characteristics of different organisms. And it's unbelievably efficient and complex. The Linux operating system is one of the most complicated computer systems that we've been able to create. It's difficult to understand, but what it does, the big difference is that there is a very large, high-level amount of code that's needed, and it affects relatively the same amount of mid-level things, and the output there is actually it's an opposite effect. It doesn't fan out and create lots of different variety. It actually sort of centers in and generates a rather low level of output. So there's a lot of mind and a lot of creativity, a lot of programming that goes in the beginning, and it kind of filters down a little bit and creates a smaller amount of output. So there's a lot of, it's top heavy. And with this here, the information in our DNA, it is a dynamic program that keeps rewriting itself and generating somehow new information to increase its complexity as it moves downstream. It's unbelievable. And in the video, he talked about how there's multiple dimensions of DNA coded instructions. So if you think about DNA and just the picture here, right, of just these different base pairs and stuff, the combinations of base pairs would be like a kind of a linear, one-dimensional sort of code that's written on each one of these little strands. But the second dimension would be sort of like this strand has to interact with another strand, right? It has to interact with this one and over here. And so they're actually making connections all throughout the strand itself. It folds back on itself and stuff like that. And so this is a picture of how the DNA and the proteins and things like that make up DNA have to fold a certain way. This looks like a jumbled mess, but it's actually a very detailed, very specific way that this DNA folds in order to do things like this strand right here. I guess you can't see my cursor there. This strand right here interacts with this strand right here, but if it was all laid out, they would be miles apart. But when it's folded, they can now interact with each other. So this one and this one now interact with each other. And as it unfolds and folds and folds in different ways, you have different things interacting. Also, genes are turned on and off throughout the process. So you know what? There's genes that are off at this level, and then there's genes that are turned on at this level, and then even more that are turned on at this level. You see how it fans out. And so as this folds and different things like that, the genes on the exterior are active, but the genes inside are inactive because they are not to be turned on quite yet during the development of the organism. They have to wait, right? And they can't be active yet. So that's like a third dimension. And the fourth dimension, of course, is time. Think about the DNA doing its work where some steps are really fast and some steps are really, really slow. And things happen at different rates in order for the proper development for things to come. So for example, if you're making something, right, and you go really fast through the early stages and then you take too much time at the later stage, like if you're making something, right, think about the time involved in making a meal, right? You have to plan what cooks for how long so that it's all ready at the same time. Some things go really fast, right? Cook really fast, and I'm not a cook, so this is a bad example for me to launch into. But let's say that the peas, okay? You're going to cook peas, right? And they boil up pretty quick. They cook pretty fast, okay? The meat, obviously. You got a roast beef or you got chicken or something like that, let's say. That takes a long time to go, right? And then you got mid-level, your potatoes or something take a little bit longer, but not as long as the meat. So all of this stuff, if you want to eat the meal all at the same time, you got to have all this planning. And the DNA, in that fourth dimension of time, actually, has its own instructions for being very careful that the timing for each thing is appropriate, and so that they all can be ready, all the instructions and all the things can be ready at the right time for the organism to function. So there's multi-dimensions, and I'm just going to leave you with this one idea that this is a little bit of activity to display this. So for example, this would be maybe, some information on a gene in your DNA. Now, you can't really make much sense of this. You take a look at this, and it's like, I have no idea what that means. That does not resemble anything that I can understand. But as you see, there are some fold marks that are in here. And so if I start to fold this thing a certain way, and you say, oh, yeah, that makes way more sense. Nope, that doesn't make sense. But look at it. Look at it. There are some definite characters there. Well, that's a P, and this is a sun, and this right here is a gamma, Greek letter, and over here, oh, wait a minute. Oh, maybe it's upside down. Or actually, maybe that's not a Greek letter. Wait a minute. Maybe that's not a P. Maybe that's a D over there. And again, sorry, you can't see. That's not a P, or is that a D? Is this a theta? Is this a sun? Is this what is this? Is this a gamma? Is that, so what happens is you have to fold some more. So DNA does this. It has these seemingly, insignificant codes. And it has to be folded a certain way. It has to engage certain things and not others. And of course, the timing is something that's important too. So here now I folded this paper some more, and we realize here, you're starting to realize that maybe this is a little bit of bleed through from the other side of the paper. So this right here, even though it appears to be characters that are maybe recognizable, they're actually, like mirror images of what's actually required. So that's another layer of complexity, something very simple that the DNA would do, many billions of times more complex. This now, I don't know, is this a P or a D? We're still looking for that. I'm seeing some more things here, but I'm thinking that the orientation here is maybe a little bit incorrect for me to understand this. So as I fold some more, there it's all folded up, and I don't know if you even noticed, but there was a piece of tape on the corner of the paper the whole time. Let me go back. Did you notice it right here? Right here? Right? Did you notice it in the first picture as well? Right here? Maybe you didn't notice that. If that's gone, this thing doesn't stick together and we can't see the message, and you're thinking, wow, still don't get it? Well, here you go. What do you think of that? Okay? Look at that message. So this is a very simplified version of sort of what our DNA is doing to bring us a message. Do your homework. Okay? But it's written in a way, this code is written in a very, very complex way that initially, okay, there was no message at the beginning. It was gibberish. It was not understandable, right? And so to have this come about by chance is very improbable. To have some kind of plan for this or some kind of mind behind this seems to be much more reasonable. Now think about this. I'm going to add one more thing to this very, simplified example, but think about this. This message is only possible for someone A, who understands English, and for B, can understand that even these two arrows, I don't know if you recognize this, those two arrows, that they would understand that those two arrows would actually not really be arrows indicating direction, but that they would be sort of the strokes that are required to write the letter K. Okay, all this sort of stuff, right? This is two letters, not just one, even though it's continuous, right here. So things like that. And this is just a very simplified version of what our DNA is doing to build you and me over time. And I guess I would, you think about the critical development of, a baby inside of a mother's womb, right? I mean, there's so much of this going on that's very critical. What happens if this paper gets ripped up, in development? Well, we don't get this message, okay? And then that has tremendous downstream effects if we think about, this diagram right here. Where was it? Right here. Yeah, so if something gets cut here, if one of these little strings gets cut, right here, something like that, well, then you don't have this, you don't have this, you don't have it connecting with all this, and then it doesn't give you a lot of, efficiency down here, right? Whereas if something gets cut here, right, well, it's just going to cut this line, and then something else is going to take, it's going to maybe miss this line. That's it, right? So, anyways, pretty cool. I would encourage you to watch a little bit more of this video yourself. Here's the video right here, the extraordinary 4-dimensional design of DNA by Dr. Robert Carter. So I would encourage you to watch this video.